On August 5, 1941, a 25-year-old woman lay almost flat in the dirt outside Odessa. Not behind the war, not beside it, inside it. 3 sides of the Black Sea port were already sealed by German and Romanian forces. The Soviet coastal army was outnumbered. The trenches were shallow. The hospitals were filling faster than the stretcher teams could empty them. And in a scraped depression south of the city, Lyudmila Pavlichenko adjusted the scope on a Mosin Nagant rifle and waited for one man to forget that he was visible. At that point, she had already killed. The Red Army did not count sniper kills by rumor. Another soldier had to verify the body. A witness had to confirm it. The number had to survive paperwork. Her first kills had survived that process. Then the number kept moving, 30, 50, 100. By the time she was promoted to senior sergeant, Soviet officers at Odessa knew exactly what she was doing. And still, somewhere inside the divisional channels, a recommendation appeared to move her away from the front. That is the part that makes the story more than a sniper story. Because the question is not simply why an army would consider removing one of its most effective shooters. The question is what the institution believed it understood about women in war. While the battlefield was already proving something else, one verified shot at a time. The Soviet Union was not opposed to women in uniform the way many armies of the period were. Women served. Women trained. Women worked communications, medicine, supply, air defense, and support roles. But frontline combat was different, and in 1941, most commanders still treated that difference as obvious. Not because every man involved was stupid, because armies trust what their systems can measure. And before the war forced the issue, the Red Army did not have a working framework for women as combat snipers inside rifle divisions. It had a sniper tradition, it had shooting clubs, it had paramilitary training through Osavia Kim. It had thousands of certified marksmen before the German invasion. What it did not have was proof that a woman could live inside the slow, filthy, frozen mathematics of sniper war and keep functioning after the first heroic day was over. And the first months of the Eastern Front were brutal teachers. A marksman who fired twice from the same position died. A sniper who did not understand counter-sniper patience died. A soldier who could shoot well on a range but could not read grass, shadows, sound, fear, and enemy habit died. The front was producing doctrine by killing the unprepared. So when senior commanders argued that women belonged in medical, communications, and logistics positions, they were not imagining a gentle war. They were imagining the one they could already see. Then Pavlichenko began giving them a different kind of evidence. Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko had not come to the rifle by accident. She was born in Bila Tserkva, Ukraine, in 1916. As a teenager, after moving to Kyiv, she joined a shooting club and worked at the Kyiv arsenal factory. Factory work hardened the hands. The range trained the eye. University trained the mind. She studied history at Kyiv University, including the campaigns of Bohdan Khmelnytsky, a commander who understood terrain, patience, timing, and the danger of being underestimated. That detail matters. Because Pavlichenko did not become dangerous because she loved noise, she became dangerous because she understood waiting. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, she was 24 years old and in her 4th year at university. She went to enlist. The officer suggested nursing. She showed him her marksmanship credentials. He had expected to sort her into a category. She forced him to look at a record, and eventually, the Army assigned her to the 25th Rifle Division. That was the first institutional problem she created. Not rebellion, not drama, a category problem. The system had places for women. It had places for snipers. It had no clean place for a woman whose proof belonged in both columns. Odessa gave the question no time to remain theoretical. The fighting outside the city was trench line, orchard edge, road bend, collapsed wall, and broken field. A sniper did not dominate that kind of ground by swaggering through it. A sniper survived by disappearing inside it. Pavlichenko learned the battlefield as if it were an argument. Where did officers stand when they thought the danger had passed? Which couriers moved too quickly? Which men bent over maps? Which helmets rose for 1 second longer than the others? Which enemy sniper had used the same angle twice because he believed nobody had understood the first shot? She discovered that officers often betrayed themselves not by bravery, but by habit. A hand toward a map case, a posture shift, a head turned just far enough to read a position. At more than 300 meters, those details lasted less than 2 seconds. 2 seconds was enough. The range had trained her trigger. History had trained her patience. War trained the rest. As the count rose, the response around her was not clean admiration. It was confusion mixed with need. The 25th Rifle Division needed what she could do, but the division had no established habit for what she was becoming. There was even a proposal from within the staff to formalize her method and use it to train other snipers. That should have been simple. It was not. There was no neat regulatory path for a female soldier to become an official sniper instructor in a frontline unit. So the idea stalled in paperwork. But the battlefield did not wait for permission. Pavlichenko trained others anyway. Later, at Sevastopol, the sniper she instructed would be credited with more than 100 enemy kills. The instruction happened. The institution simply arrived late to the fact that it was already happening. By October 1941, Odessa was nearly finished. The siege had lasted from August 5th to October 15th. During that period, Pavlichenko fought for roughly 2.5 months on the front line and recorded 187 confirmed kills. Not claims, confirmed kills. Verified through the system that made the number hard to fake and harder to ignore. Among her targets were enemy snipers. That mattered more than the count alone, because killing a rifleman removed 1 man. Killing a trained sniper removed a force multiplier. It removed fear from a trench. It reopened a path for movement. It stopped the invisible pressure that pins men down before an assault ever begins. In 1941, Soviet sniper practice had not yet fully centered counter-sniper hunting as a standard priority. Pavlichenko reasoned her way there through the ground itself. She understood that the deadliest enemy on a quiet section of front was not always the loudest weapon. Sometimes it was the patient man trying to be what she was. When Romanian forces took Odessa on October 15th, Pavlichenko's unit was withdrawn by sea to Sevastopol. The war did not become easier there. It became more concentrated. Sevastopol was rock, harbor, winter, siege guns, hunger, and air raids. The city was not merely defended, it was ground down. And in that grinding, the war took something from her that no citation could repair. She married fellow sniper Alexei Kitsenko. They shared the same brutal world of trenches, watches, and mud. Then, in March 1942, a mortar shell wounded him. He died several days later. People who served near her remembered a change afterward, a colder focus. Not a movie transformation, not a simple revenge arc, something less useful and more human. The kind of grief that does not stop a soldier from working, but changes the temperature of the work. The record shows that she kept going. By May 1942, Her confirmed kill count had reached 257. She was promoted to lieutenant. She had already been wounded more than once. Shrapnel had found her. The siege had not removed her from the line. She returned, again and again. Then June came. In the first days of June 1942, the Luftwaffe began massed bombing runs over Sevastopol. The 11th German Army under Erich von Manstein was preparing the final assault. Between June 2nd and June 6th, hundreds of tons of bombs fell on the city and harbor. Stone broke, ships burned, dust and smoke climbed over the port. And Pavlichenko was still in position. At a meeting with other snipers, she had said she would reach 300 before the siege ended. She did. In early June, a mortar round detonated near her position. Shrapnel struck her face. This time, the army did what it had once been unsure how to do. It protected the asset it had learned to value. By direct order of Soviet High Command, Pavlichenko was evacuated from Sevastopol and taken to Moscow for treatment. Her final confirmed kill total stood at 309. 36 of those were enemy snipers. That number is not just a statistic. It is the measure of how many times she entered a duel against another trained hunter and survived long enough for the other person not to. Sevastopol fell on July 4, 1942. German forces captured roughly 106,000 Soviet defenders. Pavlichenko was already gone. Not because the war had become safe for her, because the Soviet command had finally accepted that losing her would cost more than keeping her at the front could gain. Then the story changed battlefields. In September 1942, Lyudmila Pavlichenko arrived in Washington, D.C. She was 26 years old. She wore her Red Army uniform. She spoke no English, and she had been sent to help make the case for a second front in Western Europe. The American press had before it one of the most lethal documented snipers in the world. Some reporters asked about her uniform. One questioned the length of her skirt. Another treated the woman with 309 confirmed kills as if the most interesting thing about her was whether the cut of Soviet military clothing flattered her body. Pavlichenko's answer became famous because it revealed the gap between the worlds. She had spent 11 months on battlefields where a visible inch could kill a person. Now she stood before people who wanted to discuss appearance. That contrast was not comic, it was obscene. Eleanor Roosevelt understood more than most of them did. She accompanied Pavlichenko during parts of the American tour. At Hyde Park, the Roosevelt family estate, she saw the long shrapnel scar across Pavlichenko's body. There were 2 ledgers in Pavlichenko's life by then. One was carried on paper, 309 verified enemy dead. The other was carried in flesh, wounds, scars, grief, the husband who did not come home from the siege. Both ledgers had been written by the same war. Pavlichenko spoke in Washington, New York, Chicago, and elsewhere. She attended labor meetings. She visited the White House. She went on to Britain and saw Coventry, a city whose ruins had been carved by the Luftwaffe before the Soviet cities were fully known to the West as ruins. Factory workers in Coventry raised money for medical equipment for the Red Army. She accepted it. She also saw the bombed cathedral. For the record, she said little there. Sometimes silence is not absence. Sometimes it is the only form that does not cheapen what has been seen. When she returned to the Soviet Union, she did not go back to combat. She had reached the rank of major. She became an instructor and trained Soviet snipers until the end of the war. In 1943, she received the Gold Star of Hero of the Soviet Union. After the war, she completed her education and worked as a research assistant at the chief headquarters of the Soviet Navy. Songs were written about her. Stamps bore her image. The state made her into a symbol. But symbols are dangerous because they can polish away the problem they were created from. The problem was never whether Lyudmila Pavlichenko was exceptional. She was. The problem was what her exception exposed. Around 2,000 women served as snipers in the Red Army during the war. Only about 500 survived. That means the commanders who warned that frontline sniper roles would carry a terrible cost for women were not wrong about the cost. They were wrong about what the cost proved. They saw casualty risk and concluded unsuitability. The battlefield showed something harsher. It showed that women who were properly trained, properly used, and forced into the same lethal discipline as men could become not symbolic participants, but operational realities. Pavlichenko did not make war fair. She did not make the institution enlightened. She did not turn an army's doubt into respect by asking for it. She produced a record the institution could not file away. 309 confirmed kills, 36 enemy snipers, a siege survived, a doctrine embarrassed, a category broken. And somewhere inside the contradiction between the paperwork that tried to move her away and the battlefield that kept needing her, the old assumption failed. Not all at once, not cleanly, but permanently enough that it could no longer pretend it had never been challenged. The army had believed it knew where women belonged. Lyudmila Pavlichenko answered from the dirt outside Odessa. And she answered in numbers the war itself had to verify.